All right, well, today we are in the fifth part, that's right, it's been 5 weeks, of a series called Really Happy. Okay, that was pretty good. I think last week was a little bit better, but I will tell you that last week the 9:15 service crushed the 11 o'clock service. So we're in a series called Really Happy. Now here's a question I want to ask you, something like what I want you to start off thinking about. What would it take for you to be really happy? Really happy. Not like, fleeting happiness, not like when you get something new or you get a new shirt or a new pair of shoes or a new car where it's like, oh, this is exciting, but then it kind of goes away. Not something that is dependent on the ups and downs, the crazy circumstances of life. Not something that could be thrown off because of a bad email or a phone call that didn't go the way we wanted it to go. But what would it take for you to have this deep-rooted sense of contentment, of satisfaction? What would it take? And what if, the question we've been asking is, what if God wants to take you there? What if there really is a God up there in heaven who is really concerned for you and is in the business of your, not instant gratification, not momentary pleasure, but your ultimate happiness? That's the question we've been asking over the past couple weeks. I don't need to tell you that people have had their happiness thrown off a little bit lately because of all the changes in routine, we're constantly being told something different. Well, now we have to do this, now we have to do that. Now this is going to be closed, now this is back open, but it's going to be a little bit. And it's like people are just kind of tired of being told what to do. And it's like our happiness equilibrium has been thrown off a little bit. And so what we've been saying is like, well, how do we get back there to being really happy? Now, if you're like the vast majority of people on Long Island and in the Northeast especially, you may believe, though you may not have said this, that God is in the way of my happiness. Right? Like there's like the things that make me really happy, the things I'm excited about, the events, the days, the holidays, the presents, the new things that there's like my happiness box, and then there's my God box, right? And the two don't really overlap very much. And so we try to get God out of the way of our happiness, and we either avoid him or we appease him and just like do what he wants. We get back to the things that are really fun. Most of us, including myself, like can gravitate towards that. But what's interesting is that if what Jesus said is true, then that whole idea is flipped upside down. Jesus said that he came to give life and life to the full. Not like a lot of life. Other translations will say life more abundantly. Like life that feels rich. Life that's worth living, this deep-rooted sense that though it may be hard, though there may be unexpected things, though there are going to be pandemics, though there are things that nobody sees coming, there's this deep sense like, you know what? Life is still good. Life to the full. We've been looking at how do we get there? If God is really in the business of our happiness, let's put it into practice and see if he meant what he said. So on the first week, we said that happy people are grateful people. Happy people are grateful people. And if that's true, then anything that undermines your gratitude ultimately undermines your happiness. We unpacked that a little bit. We said gratitude is not just saying thanks, it's choosing to see the good. It's enjoying what we have. That's a really, really powerful thing. We also said that happy people are peaceful people. Not like they get along with everyone, though that may be true. They have peace. They're full of it. They're full of peace, right? There could be a storm on the outside, but internally things are okay. And if you've ever seen that, that's attractive. Like we want that. Who doesn't want to live like that? And if that's true, though, then anything that undermines your peace ultimately undermines your happiness. And we unpacked that a little bit. And then last week we said that happy people are people. Not meaning that they're all extroverts, that they all want to be the life of the party, but they are genuinely concerned for people. They spend time to build relationships, to figure out how to be right with people, even when they may think they're wrong about something else. They prioritize being right with people over being right with issues. And if that's true, then anything that undermines your relationships, you see the pattern here, ultimately undermines your happiness, right? So that's where we are. That's where we are. Today, we're going to talk about something that a lot of people know, but a lot of us don't actually believe, all right? And we'll jump right into it. These are the words of Jesus. He said, "It is more blessed to give than to receive." More blessed. Now, in the church world, the word blessed, it's kind of like the gap filler. We just like put that wherever we can. We'll ask God to bless this, bless that. We'll say he's a blessing. But really, like, what do we mean here, right? It's interesting. So I think I've told you guys before that sometimes it's really uncomfortable to tell people that I'm a pastor. Like, they don't know what to do with that. Some people immediately feel very, like, weird and uncomfortable, and they start thinking about, like, all the curses they've said in the conversation up until this point. And it, for the most part, never puts a positive spin on the conversation, so I avoid that question at all costs. And sometimes people, like they do, and ask some weird things. And I remember one time I was selling a car, and, this guy and I were going back and forth trying to figure out on a price, and finally we agreed on a price. And he pays for the car, comes back to pick it up, and he's like, okay, I could tell he's very uncomfortable. And I was like, oh boy, what's gonna happen here? And he's like, all right, so I spoke to my wife, and I don't know, I hope this isn't like weird or anything, but I told her what you do, and this car's for my daughter, and so she was wondering, like, could you bless it? And I was like, I don't know. I already gave you a pretty good price on the car. Like, it depends. Do you want the limited blessing, the extended blessing, 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain blessing? No, I was like, okay, I can't do anything magical to the car, but I can pray for your daughter, right? And so that's how that went. This word, more blessed. The idea here of blessing is to be happy or to make someone happy. But it's not just surface level happy, like I got a new toy happy. It's deep down, deep rooted, this sense like some people would say like divine favor. Like it is a deep rooted, unshakable like happiness. And what Jesus is saying is you get that from giving more than you get it from receiving. In other words, he would say that happy people are giving people. Happy people are giving people. We all know there is something that feels really good about giving $10, right? Like more than taking $10. It can be fun to give. I worked for UPS for a little while around the Christmas season. This was years ago before I became a pastor. And I was a little helper, like the elf that delivers all the packages to the door. They even gave me a green vest, but no like shoes with the bells on them. And so I would get to the door, and I loved it. UPS doesn't bring bills, they just bring gifts. And so it was around the Christmas season, and I'd like get to the door and ring the bell, and there they would be, and they'd be like, oh, and I'd be like, it's here, right? And people would be so excited. It's just fun. It's fun to give. We know that. The problem is not that we don't believe that happy people are giving people. The problem is what we believe in addition to that. Or we could say that anything that undermines your generosity ultimately undermines your happiness. And so, what's the thing that undermines our generosity? What's the belief that we believe in addition to the fact that happy people are giving people? It's that happy people have more. Happy people have more. This is something that a lot of us wouldn't say we believe, but we live this way. And I do too, right? Like when you find out you are going to run into more, most of us don't turn it down. Most of us are excited. Like if you have investments, you want your investments to go up. You don't want them to go down, right? Happy people have more. But it's not as simple as we make it out to be. Like, okay, so you've heard people say that money can't buy you happiness, right? Anybody ever heard anyone say that? Money can't buy you happiness? Yeah. Well, I don't say this about a lot of things, but that's one of those lessons I'd really like to learn the hard way, Like, you're right, money can't buy me happiness, but it can buy me a hot tub, It can buy me a pickup truck, buy me a Tesla. It's this belief that more equals happy. More equals happy. And when we believe that, that's the thing that gets in the way of our happiness. So, while money can't buy you happiness, it does play a role in our pursuit of happiness. It's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing, it's just a thing, and it plays a role. So, one time, Jesus is teaching all these people, and he's interrupted by these two brothers. Apparently, these two brothers had just lost their father, and their father had left them everything that he owns. He left them this enormous inheritance, and they're fighting over it, which is a more common thing than we'd like to think. They're having a money fight. And so they get an opportunity to talk to Jesus. They get in front of Jesus, and one of the brothers is like, hey, Jesus, my brother's not giving me what he owes me, which is just crazy if you think about it, right? Like Jesus, he gave blind people sight. He helped paralyzed people walk. He was doing crazy things. And this guy finally gets to the front of the line in front of hundreds of people, and he's telling on his brother because he wants money. But it's because he believes that more equals happy. He wants more. And so here we see this person ready to give up what matters, chasing after something that doesn't. And we see this all the time. This example, it's a powerful example, and it's still, for 2,000 years, has been an extremely relevant one, where we see money fights all the time, splitting up relationships. The number one reason for divorce in our country is money. Money. And when you get married, no one is thinking, oh, we're gonna fight about money so much that we don't wanna be together anymore. Right? Nobody thinks, I'm sure these two brothers were not like, oh, we're gonna fight about money and then not be close anymore because of money. That father, before he died, I'm sure it would have ripped him apart if he knew his kids were not gonna talk because of his money. It's just not worth it. They're trading something that matters for something that doesn't. And so Jesus says something very interesting. He says, watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Now, this word greed, when we hear it, it's like sinister. We think of evil, like someone with horrible intentions. But really, it's less like bad as it sounds like in our language. This is the idea of just wanting more. He's saying, be careful. Be careful of the desire for more. Why? This is not a thou shalt not. It's not like don't want more. It's be careful, because more is not always a bad thing. More can be a very good thing, but more also has the power to take control, to ruin relationships, to make us give up what matters for things that don't. And so Jesus says, watch out. Why? Because life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. Do you remember when Jesus said he came to give life and life to the full? He uses the same word here for life. Life to the full. The abundant life does not come in the abundance of things. Or we could say, for our terminology, the abundance of life is not found in the abundance of things. And like Jesus does so many times, he's like immediately ready to drop a story, and he does. And here's the story. He says, a certain rich man, the ground of a certain rich man, pause. We don't really know much about this rich man. We just know, here's a guy who has more. Jesus is teaching a crowd, right? They're all listening. He's like, okay, here's a guy who has more. He owns land and he's rich. Okay, and everyone's like, I want to be that guy, right? He says, the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. Wow, here's a guy who has more than me, and guess what happened? He just got more. He was already rich, but he took his life savings and he invested in Dogecoin, and now he's just crazy rich, all right? So he got more, right? So he thought to himself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. Congratulations. You made it. You wanted more. You got more. Now be happy. Enjoy. And he's like, now I'm happy. Nope. That's not what he says. It says he thought to himself, next verse, what shall I do? He's rich. He's got more, and more's coming in. He goes, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. There's a guy, his name is Robert Kiyosaki. He wrote a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And what's interesting, he said, this guy has a lot of money. He's like, fear is not a money thing. It's just a thing. Fear is about fear. He said, I know a lot of people who are rich who worry more about their money than a lot of people who are poor. He's like, if you're worrying about money, you're just going to worry about money. It doesn't matter what you have. And this is interesting. It's making this point right here. What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. He goes, okay. Then he said to himself, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones. We just found out he's already got full barns. He's richer than we thought than we thought he was. There we go. And build bigger ones. And there I will store my surplus grain. So here he is. If you're in the crowd, like listening to Jesus, you're like, oh my gosh, this guy's so pathetic. He already has more than me. He gets more, and he still wants more. He's still worrying about more. In other words, we can say that more is not good or bad, but it doesn't lead to happy. It just leads to more. And the dangerous thing about more is that the pursuit of more, if you're always focused on more, it can distract you from actually being happy. Jesus does something kind of cute here with the words that he uses. This word for abundant harvest, when he says the man's ground yielded an abundant harvest, that word sounds almost exactly the same as the word he uses in the next verse when he says to himself, he says, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Remember this? Eat, drink, and be merry. Be happy. Then I'll be happy. That word for happy is the same word when Jesus said it's not the same word. It sounds almost exactly the same as the word he uses for an abundant harvest. The idea here is that this man already has what he's chasing after. He doesn't say, like, right now, I'll say to myself, okay, you made it. Enjoy life. He's like, no, one day I have more, then I got more, but I still want more. And then one day out there down the road, eventually, then I'll get to happy, and then everything will be okay. Once I have more, well, then I'll be really happy. And the people listening are like, no, it doesn't work that way. We know, like they're looking on from the outside, like, are you kidding? You got it. You've got what I want. So my question is, what do you say to yourself? Like, well, once I have a little more, then I'll be happy. Then I'll say to myself, okay, relax, enjoy what you have. Eat, drink, and be happy. Then I'll. Is it like a certain amount of money? Or maybe like rising to a certain position? Or your kids getting to a certain, once I have more of this, once I have more of that, once my bank account is a little more, like there's this chase. And what Jesus is showing everyone in the crowd, what is abundantly clear to everyone in the crowd, is that this guy's never gonna find what he's looking for. He's looking for more, and he already has it. And then God says something interesting. There's no one else in the story, so God speaks up. It says, and God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? Now there's two things here about this verse. The first is that it's not an insult, right? When he says you fool, like don't read the voice of your 7-year-old boy into the you fool. In the biblical context, a fool is somebody who does something that hurts them. Somebody who does something that, like, they continue to do the same thing, producing the same destructive results. What God is saying here is, look what you have, look what you got more of, and look what you still want. You never arrived. The second thing is that this isn't a punishment. This isn't God stepping in and being like, now I'm going to kill you because you got a lot of money. The idea is that immediately, death puts things in perspective. Like the game, it all goes back in the box at the end. And this poor guy interestingly enough, spends his entire life just racing and racing and racing and racing and racing and racing and racing, and he never arrives. His story is all about him, and he never even gets there. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy. Having more is not a bad thing. It can be a very good thing, but it can get in the way of our happiness. Like, remember, right? Like I've said this before, try not to think about right and wrong. Like, is it right? Is it wrong that he was giving or not giving, or was generous or not generous? But just look at him. His happiness is still like way out there. Like, one day I'll hit it when I have more. He doesn't even give us an amount. Jesus doesn't tell us how much he had. It's just that he wants more. More can be dangerous, and it undermines our generosity. At the end, Jesus kind of sums this up and makes an interesting point. He talks a little bit about worrying about money. And he says, well, at the end of the story, he says, this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. It's that same picture. But at the end of this whole thing, he tells people to be generous, to give. He tells them to sell their possessions and give to the poor. I'm driving Jim crazy because none of my slides are in order. So we're freestyling a little bit back there. So he says, sell your possessions and give to the poor. And he says, then you will have treasure in heaven, where a thief cannot steal and a moth cannot destroy. Because I know we all walked in here this morning like worried about moths destroying our stuff. But the idea is that not that you have to get rid of all your stuff. The point is give to the point that it may cost you something. You may feel like you have less because you gave. And then from that, when he says treasure in heaven, yes, it may have this idea of one day when you die, you'll be rewarded for what you gave. But it's also this idea of like, we call it God's kingdom on earth, or the kingdom of heaven on earth. Like, we live by a different set of rules. And what Jesus is saying is that when you live by these rules, you receive when you give, and it's something that no one can take and nothing can destroy. It's a sense of joy that no one can touch. His point is to live for what lasts. In other words, what he's saying is like, there is a connection between money and happiness. But it's not in how well you live. It's in how well you give. At the end, when God is talking to the man, he says, who? Who will get what you have? The implied answer there is nobody. There's no one else in the story. It was all for him. Now, there's two things about that story. One, God is not saying that it's bad to have a lot of money. In fact, the Apostle Paul wrote a letter to his apprentice named Timothy, and he was talking about how to run a church. He said, tell rich people to be generous and not to put their hope in their wealth. He doesn't say tell them to repent and get rid of all their stuff. He says tell them to be generous and not to trust in the money. The other thing is that he's not saying that it's bad to save. Like, if you have ever read the book of Proverbs, it's very helpful to save, right? That's a good thing. The point is that he made the assumption that it's all for his consumption. I didn't make that up. But he made the assumption that it's all for him. And so it's a story of waste. Think about the people in your life that have made an impact on you. The things that, like, maybe people in your life who are gone. And you think about the things that you remember. You know what you remember? You remember what they gave. At a funeral, like, no one gets up and is like, all right, now we're going to read the balance of their checking account, right? Or they had really great furniture. No, they talk about what they gave to other people. And for you, like, even right now, at the end of your life and right now, you will look back and find the most joy in the stuff that you gave. In the way that you gave, whether it was money or time or effort or anything else, attention, you will find the most joy in what you give. And so our story here is a story of missed potential. This guy had so much, he could have done so much, but he just was so worried about the more race that he never looked out to other people. And so Jesus says, watch out, be on guard against all types of wanting more. We have to be careful. We have to be careful. And so what do? Well, here, we believe in giving, like we've been talking about, saving, and living. Having a plan. When he says be on guard, it's like watch out, right? If you're watching out for something, if you're on guard, you're strategic. You have a plan. You decide what you're going to do, how you're going to be careful. And so we believe like give, save, live. You live, we believe, with a budget. And there can be as much space or margin or however you want to do a budget, but at some point in the beginning of the month, you decide you're going to tell your money what to do. It's not going to tell you what to do. And you can decide to put as much of it wherever you want, but you decide that it's going to be your servant, not your master. The second thing we could do is save. Save. We talked 2 weeks ago about peace, right? Happy people are peaceful people, right? And what I said was that you play a major role in your peace. Your control plays a major role in the protection of your peace, I think is what we said. This saving is part of that. Money in the bank is peace in the heart. When you know, like, if your car breaks down, doesn't mean you, like, can't feed your hamster that week. Like, that's a good feeling. And the last thing is give. Give. Now, I got to say this. We did our homework before we started this church. We found out that most people on Long Island, they don't want to go to church because they believe that the church just wants their money. And so we are really, really careful about the way we talk about money here. If that's you, even just a little bit, like, if you don't trust us and you think we want your money, or maybe there's this party that's like, still not sure, are they trying to get something out of us? Like, really, don't give us any money. Don't. I would rather you never give us a penny than you think that we want something from you. But generosity is too important to your sense of meaning in life for us to not talk about it at all. And so we believe in two types of giving, in regular giving and in readily giving. Regular meaning, like with the budget, you decide at the beginning of the month, okay, this amount of money is going out. And it can go to a church or it can go to something else you believe in. But it's something that you're building outside of yourself, something that you look back on and be like, I was part of that. There are people in this church that give a percentage of their income to this church. And if you've experienced anything positive from being here, it's because those people have made it possible, because someone believed in it and they made it happen. And so we can give regularly, right? But we can also give readily. And what I mean by that is like, so I like to play basketball. And before COVID hit, like back when we were allowed to touch each other, I used to plan times to play basketball throughout the week, regularly. But I always kept a pair of sneakers in my car. I still do, just in case the opportunity presents itself, because I want to also be ready to play. If we are going to learn how to be giving people, how to be generous people, if we believe happy people are giving people, we need to be ready to give. We need to learn to look for opportunities to give. I think right now, if we've been talking a lot about COVID and what it's done to the world and our community, I think right now this is what our community needs. It needs people who are ready to give, not because people need $5 or $10 or $1 or $2, but because we need, like people need the joy that comes from receiving something unexpectedly. And you and I need the joy that comes from giving something to someone that we didn't have to. Not like, okay, like I gotta get somebody this gift, right, because there's some kind of obligation, or I don't wanna show up empty-handed, or there's this expectation, but like totally freely. Like you see a need and you could go by and no one would notice anything. No one would say, but you stop and choose to meet that need. We need that here. And that's like, we need to learn to look for those opportunities. Have you ever been in the grocery store? This happened to me like 3 times. I'm at the grocery store, I'm like paying, and I'm like looking for change, right? The extra quarter or whatever I need. And somebody behind me just is like, hey, gotcha. And they just slide over a quarter. And it's like, if that's ever happened to you, it's like the best thing in the world. It feels like an angel just descended next to you, like, well, who are you to care about me? And all of a sudden it could be a 10 cents, 2 cents, but somebody like just looks like, hey, I got you. It's like, yeah, thanks, bro. And all of a sudden we're friends, and I leave there happier, and that person leaves there, and it's just a little tiny thing. I think that's what Jesus meant when he told us to be the light of the world, be like little glimmers of hope and joy in the midst of all the darkness. We need this right now. I saw a video online it was this guy, and he's going about his routine, and in the whole beginning part of the video, he's just cranky. So he's pulling out of his car, pulling out of his driveway in his car. He looks behind him, he sees a kid on a skateboard, and he's like, oh, what's this kid's problem, right? And the kid continues, he's angry. He gets on the road, he sees someone angry in their car, just disgruntled and whatever. He's like, oh, it's their problem. He gets to a coffee shop, and he sees a barista behind the counter, and she doesn't look very happy, and there's someone yelling at the barista. They're obviously not happy. It's just like one bad interaction after the next. But then there's this moment in the video where he puts on these glasses, magic glasses. And all of a sudden, it changes the way he sees people. He sees the barista in the coffee shop, and it says, right over her, there's a little caption that only he could see. It says, struggling with an eating disorder. He sees the person yelling at her. It says, going through a horrible divorce. He sees the person in the car, and it says, in an abusive relationship. He sees a little kid in his driveway, and it says something like he's just looking for someone who's going to care about him. Everybody has a story. And right now, those stories, everybody's story is a little bit worse. Most people, their day is a little bit harder. And you and I have an opportunity to step into that need. And it's not so much that we don't want to that stops us, it's that we're not looking for the need. If we're going to learn that happy people are giving people, we need to be looking for opportunities to give. And so, we're real big around here about not pressuring people to give. We normally don't pass things out in a service, but because of what we're talking about today, we want to give you an opportunity to give. And so I'm going to ask the ushers in the back. They're going to come forward and they're going to hand out envelopes. And I want everyone to take one of these envelopes and put it someplace where you'll see it. Take it with you. Inside that envelope, there's $10. And so take it with you. If you ride the train, take it with you on the train. If you sit at a desk, keep it on your desk. If you're out and about, walking around on the sidewalks, keep it in your bag. Keep it somewhere where you'll see it on a regular basis. And my challenge for you this week is to empty that envelope, take the $10 out, look for a need, and meet that need before the end of the week. This is less about the money in the envelope than it is about the envelope. When we see constantly, I have the opportunity to be that person on the line who just slides a little extra money over. I have the opportunity to surprise someone I work with something to drink. I have the opportunity to pick something up for that kid in the store, or little tiny things. And I think what you'll see is that real joy comes from giving. But we have to learn to look for the needs. We have to be ready to give. And then we'll start to understand that happy people are giving people. That the abundance of life does not consist of the abundance of possessions. Let's pray together. God, we are so grateful that you have given us opportunities to give, that we can step into this opportunity to be light in the darkness. God, I think about the people in this room, however many there are, several dozen people, and several dozen moments this week where they have the opportunity to be light in a dark situation, to be that small spark of encouragement or hope or joy in the day of someone whose day might be darker than we understand. So God, give us opportunities. Show us how to be generous people. Show us how to live like our generous God. In Jesus' name we pray.